Hi, welcome back to episode 35. And Eve is here to discuss a little bit more information here.
Yes, we have a lot of material
a
today
lot
to
of
cover.
things. I think everybody's going to like this one.
Yes, we're going to talk about Yo-Hanan.
Mhm.
Yeshua promised that he would visit him
Right.
after 2 days, right?
Mhm.
We're going to talk about Myriam, also known in the Western world as Mary Magdalene.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Mhm.
Mhm.
And then we're going to talk about Judas,
Oh,
Yeah.
like the Judah?
the Judah. Yes.
Ooh, okay.
Okay.
Because he has a brother that's named Judah, right?
Yeah, but the brother is fine. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just so that there's
Right.
no confusion.
So basically, as I mentioned, after the 2 days that Yeshua allocated to in waiting, to talk to Yo-Hanan, he basically used the time right after the evening prayer when everything is quiet in Jerusalem.
Mhm.
He needed that kind of peace in the atmosphere, to decide, and then he decided to visit Yo-Hanan, and with a simple desire is teleporting his soul to the fortress of Machiros.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And when he entered the cell, his cousin Yo-Hanan is crouched inside the cell, and he's about 2 feet away from Yeshua.
Mhm.
So the landing was good. And Yeshua at that
Kind of
point,
like Star Trek landing.
right,
We weren't
exactly.
sure
Yeah.
where they
So
were going to
Yeshua
land.
is going to start densifying his light body, and he
Mhm.
will slowly appear real in the cell. And because Yo-Hanan is not perceiving him, Yeshua calls him. He said, "Yo, do you hear me?" And the body of Yo-Hanan starts moving. He was probably on the floor, in the dirty floor, and painfully, and his eyes are searching the darkness of the cell. And then suddenly, he sees Yeshua, because actually in his light body, Yeshua is
Lights up the
emanating.
room.
He's emanating some kind of
Oh,
glow.
yeah. Okay.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So Yeshua is standing in front of Yo-Hanan in the cell, in the fortress, right? And Yo-Hanan, of course, is startled. I mean, he was not expecting that. He didn't, And he places back against the wall. And when he does that, Yeshua can see that his face has been hurt and swollen from the beating. They probably tortured him and beat him to death. And Yo-Hanan says, "Oh, my brother, master." And at that point, Yo-Hanan tries to lean to touch Yeshua's feet, but Yeshua places his hand on his forehead, on his head, and stop him. But at the same time, he realized that his light body is now solid enough so he can prevent
okay.
Yo-Hanan from getting too close.
Mm-hmm.
So for the people who are curious about this teleportation and the way you can densify your light body, I don't know much about it, of course, but there are some beings on this planet, especially in the Himalayas, who are, we call them masters, who are capable of doing that.
Right.
Yeah. So it's basically a teleportation of your soul, of your light body, which is mostly the etheric and the astral plane. And then you try to gather molecules and particles, which are basically all around us all the time, And those molecules and particles are gathered and attracted, and you can, after probably a lot of exercise and practice, you can actually densify your light body.
Is that what Babaji does?
Yes, that's one of the things that Babaji does all the time. I mean, for him, it's like second nature. He does it all the time. But there are some beings. There are some books who have told about that, and I think one of them is called Master of the Forest.
Yes, Masters of the
Masters
Forest.
of the Forest.
Yeah, 4 volumes.
By T. Spalding, I believe, right? And so, if you want to know more about that, I would recommend that you read those books.
Yeah.
Of course,
put that in the.
Yeah, we will put that. Of course, most people would think, "Oh, it's impossible," but.
Yeah, we don't realize the possibilities.
Right. So again, going back, so Yeshua tells Yo-Hanan, "Here I am, Yo. You are doubting, right? You are doubting that I would visit you." And Yo-Hanan asked him, are you coming to free me? I don't even know if I want it. I saw myself as dead already. I don't know. What will I do with my life if you free me, And Yeshua responds and he says, it is up to you. You tell me. And Yo-Hanan goes back into his monologue, almost a kind of monologue, and says to Yeshua, I've already recognized and announced I must recess, okay? But how will I do that if I am under the sun near my river? My place is perhaps simply here. And at that point, Yeshua realized that his friend, and cousin and friend from many lifetimes, has pretty much given up, contrary to what the scripture are saying. They said that Yo-Hanan didn't trust Yeshua, he was doubting him and so forth. This is not what is happening. And so Yeshua is going to kneel in front of Yo-Hanan and tells him about certain agreement that they had done in previous lifetimes. We have seen in the previous episode that those two had multiple lifetimes together before. And Yeshua talks to him about the true liberator and how Yo-Hanan has prepared the path for that purpose. Okay, and Yeshua again realized that deep down Yo-Hanan was expecting a Messiah. Okay, and he was expecting a Messiah that would be a leader of men, but also a leader of souls. And Yeshua tells him, that he is neither. He's not coming to change the government in Palestine and get rid of the Romans. That's not his job, And so he tells Yo-Hanan, and believe me, I did not come for the people of this country, but for the entire human race.
Oh.
So they're going to continue talking about that. And again, the Akashic Memory are not giving us the details of what is being exchanged between them. But as I mentioned to you, as a summary, Yeshua realized that Yo-Hanan is still crystallized on certain expectation, and that his ego is taking over his soul at this moment.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he does not realize the plan, the cosmic plan, the grandiose architecture which has been put in place, or maybe he doesn't want to accept it,
Yeah.
And so one last time, Yeshua asked him, Yo, do you want to get out of here? And Yo-Hanan says, I still don't know. I'm not sure I want to be free.
He probably already got his mindset.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, he has his mindset. He has seen himself, as dead, and he doesn't know what his life is going to be, even if he's being free, So at that point, some people may wonder, how would Yeshua free him? So again, I want to make it very clear that with the Christic energy that is living in Yeshua, he could have basically rendered unconscious the guards, which are, taking care of the fortress.
Right.
And he could have also very easily dismantled the door and the locks. Okay, with the paramukta, he can create anything he wants pretty much. So he can also destroy what he wants. So he could have destroyed the locks, he could have destroyed the door, he could have rendered unconscious the guards, and he could have allowed Yo-Hanan to get out of here. But that's not what it was done. And slowly, Yeshua is going to take Yo-Hanan's hands and he is going to deconstruct his light body, returning to his vehicle of flesh in Jerusalem. Okay?
That'd be very convenient.
Yeah, think about it, right? You want to visit family in another country or whatever.
It'd be nice to be able to do.
You don't need a passport.
No. Just want to make sure you get reconstructed back again. Yeah.
With the local particulars and molecules.
Everything fall in the right place.
Yeah. So on his way back, Yeshua thinks about, this meeting he had with Yo-Hanan, and instead of being extremely sad, he's actually realizing that what is happening is part of a cosmic logic, okay? So instead of feeling sad, he feels a great tenderness, which is flooding him, inside him. So for him, he realized that, that's a plan. That's a cosmic plan. Yo-Hanan came back in this lifetime to help uh, hundreds of people to be baptized and to be awakened, but mostly to give this second initiation, major initiation, to to Yeshua.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
that was his purpose in this life.
Mm-hmm.
So, so it's a morning. Yeshua is lodging in Jerusalem, and he's using the house of his uncle Yussaf. Okay, and he wakes up very early in the morning. It is the beginning of a very beautiful day, and he's describing like the birds are chirping, and the garden has a lot of fragrance, mostly jasmine, and all this stuff. So it is a very pleasant place. The house of Yussaf is actually quite beautiful. And this is the day when he's going to meet for the first time the adopted daughter of Yussaf. And the name of that daughter is Miriam. Okay, she's known in the Western world as Mary of Magdalene because it's Mary from the village of Migdel.
Okay.
So that became Mary Magdalene, which is kind of an extension of what it should be. But anyway, her real name is Miriam, and we will call her Miriam. And Yeshua is actually struck by her. He immediately recognized her as if her name was on top of a page next to his name. And Miriam was probably feeling the same about Yeshua, but she did not show any of it. Okay, she's a proud and wild character, and she's very, very strong actually. And her strengths and her weakness, like all people who have come to that stage, in this soul evolution, is showing. And she doesn't want to seem too weak,
right?
And so Yeshua is observing her, and he's observing her physically, but he's also observing her soul, and because he can see much more beyond the physical envelope, right?
She can't hide everything.
No, she cannot hide anything. Yeah, it's kind of unfair, right? It's
it almost really is.
But anyway, so what Yeshua describes about her, although we have absolutely no picture of her or drawings or anything, but he describes her as, he said that her beauty was different, and she had extremely long and voluminous hair, that it was almost impossible to hide under a veil.
So it's a lot of,
she's not a woman who is going to wear a veil easily, because she has a very big mane. Exactly, yeah. And Yeshua also realized that she's not a woman that will take care of the petty tasks of every day. Okay,
she's not going to be scrubbing the floors and doing the dishes. Is that what he means?
Exactly, yeah. We're going to talk more about her, and but we will do that at the end of the presentation.
Okay.
Because she's actually a very important piece in the life of Yeshua. And at one point, Yeshua asked her about her plants and herbs that she's growing in Migdel, in the house that Yussaf gave her, right? And she goes, "You know that?" With a tone that sounded like Yeshua was intruding on our private life,
Right.
She'd say, "Oh, wow, okay, well, you're a little bit too curious, And then she asked Yeshua all about his trips.
Oh, so finally somebody has
and life in other countries. But,
Right.
she does it in a way to prevent him from asking questions about her life.
Oh, okay.
Because there are certain things that she doesn't want people to know about. I mean, she's placing it upon herself, but she's really not responsible for what happened to her. And even though Yeshua has absolutely all his memory intact, the Christic energy inside him does not want to reminisce on the past, and he's actually locked in the present. And this is what he tells Miriam. Miriam, I'm living with intensity every instant, and that is why I came back from where the sun rises, from the east, right? I would like to teach you to use that sun inside you. Would you like that? And Miriam at this point doesn't know what to respond, And she says, Yeshua, besides my herbs, I'm not even sure I can study. So again, she's probably too humble in a way, And Yeshua tells her, who tells you to study? That moment we are sharing, does it need to be studied? This moment deserves to be lived and for us to be immersed into it, right? As if we were married with the water.
Oh.
So Miriam does not respond, which is a sign for Yeshua that she's entering what he calls the fermentation process.
No, he's bringing her
Yes,
in.
he's reeling her in. And he's going to part with Miriam. She goes to the market, and he meets his group of disciples at that point, and they are all very agitated. Okay? And we're going to understand why. So the reason why is they are very agitated is that the healing of the young adolescent that took place, as you may remember in the last episode, has created commotion in Jerusalem. And the bedside, where all the 14 disciples are residing, while Yeshua is staying with his uncle, has been flooded by people hoping for healings.
Oh no!
So
this is what happened to him in the previous lifetime.
Yes.
What is it?
Zoroaster.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah.
And he was trying to avoid it in this lifetime.
So Barthélemy used his loud voice to make them go away. And he says to Yeshua, I know that you do not like that, but we lied to them. So Yeshua says, okay, Barthélemy, it's not a question of liking or not liking my brother. Every time you lie, you add a little knot on the thread of your soul. So, if you picture your soul as being a thread, infinite, with infinite length, actually, because it stays the same after life, right? You're creating a little knot in it. I think it's a very nice picture, actually.
Yes.
And a little knot is still a knot unless you untie it immediately. So instead of lying, tell these women and these men that everybody has his own life and that they will meet mine when the time is right. And if they see further, they're their own little ego. And so Barthélemy asks, why do you say if they see beyond themselves? And Yeshua responds, because otherwise they would just cross me and nothing would happen.
Yeah.
So the heat inside Jerusalem, and the noise are pushing Yeshua and his group to get outside of the city to a place which is kind of famous. I think the Bible talks about it quite a lot, where olive trees are growing.
Okay.
And it is shaded, it's quiet. And there is
cooler.
Yeah, a lot cooler. And there is even an olive mill, which is used to produce the oil, with a big stone
presser
to ground.
Right.
And so they are crossing the Cedron. Cedron is a little river that flows by Jerusalem on a little bridge. And during the crossing, the group must let go a century of Romans, which is a group form of about 80 Roman soldiers and their leader, the centurion. And the centurion is actually riding a horse. And when they cross and pass in front of the small group, the centurion strangely looks intensely to Yeshua, as if he knew him somehow. Okay, so we'll leave it to there, but maybe that Roman will play an active role later on in the life of Yeshua. And Andrew gets close to Yeshua and says, well, Yeshua, he looked at you, Master. Some are talking about you. Today, I'm scared. I guess Andros was kind of scared to see this big army of 80 some Romans, And Yeshua turns to him and he said, scared? Well, then do not stay with me, Andros,
Things are going to get scarier.
Andros responds, you're tough, Rabbi. No, Andrew, I'm demanding. And the more you progress, the more you will understand the importance of it. And so the group is going to sit under the olive trees, and Barthélemy brings back the story of the lies and the knots. So they want to know more about how to untangle those knots, And Barthélemy tells, Rabbi, how can we entangle a lie? And Yeshua goes into an explanation. Oh, it's very simple. It is in your heart that things must take place. If you use your heart, if you use your head, it is completely different, right? Now listen to that story. And Yeshua tells, as he teaches a lot with stories, I think
Right.
and we learn so much with stories, and
Right.
that's the way it goes, yeah. And he said, 2 men were one day in a field when they saw a third man arrive toward them, running. The third man was afraid. And the 2 men watches him, pass by and run away. And then behind him came a 4th man running, but this one has a big stone in his hand. And the 4th man stops and asks, did you see a man pass by and running away? And one of the first man in the field responds, no, we didn't see anybody. So the 4th man, furious, starts running, but he runs in a different direction, in a way that he will never catch the 3rd one, right?
Right. Right.
And so the 2nd man, who is in the field with the first, who has not said a word, suddenly speaks to his friend and he said, you lied. Aren't you ashamed? It is against the scriptures. So the 1st man responds, it is also written, you shall not judge.
Go back and forth.
What are you
Pointing
doing,
fingers.
you? Right?
Yeah,
You're
right.
judging me right now. What do you know about the reason for the 4th man to hit the runner and the reason for the 3rd man to run away? What do you know about that? And then he continues, I did not lie because my head was in my heart, and my heart at that moment was in the realm of protection.
Okay.
In that instant, it was my truth. So it is, Yeshua resume, the soul is not hurt when it is using the spontaneity and the coherence of the heart. The lie is built in the head, always. The lie is always created in the mind and in the head. The heart cannot lie. And Yeshua continues, as far as life, it is similar to a pricky flower. If you learn that it stings, you will suffer, right? On the other hand, if you learn to recognize and appreciate the simple beauty of the pricky flower, this is the only thing you will perceive. You will just appreciate its beauty, right? And he goes into something strange, which I have personally not completely understood, but he says to his disciple, sometimes it is better to be a donkey and to accept to eat a pricky flower. May the one who has long ears understand me.
Say that one more time. What was that?
Well,
may the one who has long ears
understand me. Maybe we should listen to him.
I need to contemplate that a little bit.
We need to contemplate it. But yeah, so anyway, what I can say is that the donkey has a reputation of being a stupid animal, which is absolutely the inverse of what it is.
Right.
It is a very, very smart animal. And the reason why there was a donkey cap, right, in the schools.
Yeah, dunce cap.
Yeah, dunce cap, whatever you call it. It's because by placing that hat on the head of silly or stupid students, it was hoped that by giving them that hat, some kind of wisdom would come into their numb skull. That was the reason why. And I think it's important to say that.
Yeah.
It's not to denigrate or to lower you,
right.
and say, oh, you're like a donkey because you're so stupid. So let's put a hat that looks like a donkey on you.
Right.
No. The original purpose of that was to try to bring some intelligence and some wisdom into your skull. And so this little story is bringing peace among the group, but Yeshua recognized that all these are to be taken higher in their understanding of life, right? And that this responsibility rests on his shoulders. Yeah. So Simon is going to break the silence. So, Rabbi, you are placing the intention above the act. Huh? So the intention is more important than the act. And Yeshua responds, Simon, you understood me perfectly. When the wish is to cause harm or to deceive, when it is born of greed, the soul becomes dirty. And we know so many people today who are doing that, right? But when there is no planning, when there is no malice, the soul remains clean. So it means that even if you may be lying at one point or doing something not right, as long as you do it with your heart, you will not stain your soul.
We are sparing somebody,
Yes,
something
exactly.
that's...
sparing his life.
Yeah.
So Yeshua is telling his group of disciples, I'm asking you, what is false and what is the truth? What is good and what is bad? Tell me. I mean, it's impossible. And Simon responds, it seems to me that what is bad creates suffering. So Yeshua responds to Simon, do you think it is so simple? Have you noticed that these two principles, right, the good and the bad, among which life oscillates, I mean, life constantly oscillates between the two, right, are actually slightly covering themselves with masks, Sometimes we think that what is good is actually bad, right? And what we think is bad may actually be good. So it's really difficult to make the difference, right? So Simon goes again, you mean that the good one day can become the bad of the next day and reciprocally? And Yeshua responds, you understood me perfectly. If this reality is easy to notice, it is most difficult to accept it and to live it. And the same applies to the truth and to the false. This is why I'm asking you all to call the eternal inside you, because the eternal sits way beyond the truth and the false. And I want you to stay in that space, above the truth and the false, where those two notions do not exist. Now, I am asking you that question. Are you ready to feel and be like those olives all around us, which will all be pressed to produce oil one day? And then Simon goes again, but Rabbi, are the olives suffering? That's a good question, right?
Right, yeah.
Simon, what do you know about the consciousness that is located above all the olives of the universe, right? Maybe the consciousness of the olives wants those olives to be pressed, so that human beings, can benefit from the olive oil.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And Yeshua continues, and are you not all similar to this fruit, all issued from the same consciousness, mingled with the eternal? Yeah, it's true.
Right.
All the human beings are coming from the same creator.
Oh, right? Yeah, of course.
Yeah. No matter the
That's
religion.
Oneness. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter your color, race,
right,
creed, nothing.
So the day is going to continue like this, with a lot of teachings and stories. And Yeshua is making sure to bring back all explanation always to the heart. Okay, he doesn't want the explanation to stay in their head. It has to bring back to the heart. And he's very happy to teach this group of men. This is something that he really enjoys. And at one point, Eleazar asked Yeshua, are they all contemplating the large walls of Jerusalem? Okay, again, they are sitting on a little hill, overlooking the city of Jerusalem. And Eleazar asked, do you like this city, Master? And Yeshua responds, how to not like it, my brother? And first of all, I do not know how to not love, even if I know I have that choice. When peace and war are coexisting in a specific location, it means that this place has something to say and that it is important to look at it.
Wow.
Yeah, I would say that those words are, were present and were actual, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah.
but they are still
today.
They are still very,
Yes.
very, very true today.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the whole group goes back to the city of Jerusalem, and since they tried everything possible to free their friend Yo-Hanan, they decided to leave Jerusalem the following day. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as Yeshua returns to the home of his uncle Yussaf, Yussaf jumps to him and all excited announced that Herod is coming to Jerusalem. So
I hope that's a good thing.
the procurator of that province,
Right.
Herod,
Yeah.
is coming to Jerusalem. So nobody knows why exactly. But Uncle Yussaf is seeing another chance to help Yo-Hanan if he can obtain a meeting, with
Right.
Herod. Yeah. And so the whole group, including Yeshua, of course, decide to postpone their departure from Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to stay a few more days in Jerusalem. And so the next day, Yeshua is observing the aura of Myriam. And he realized that the pink color of the aura is a lot more than the prospect of freeing Yo-Hanan. I mean, of course, he's happy that there may be a chance to free Yo-Hanan, right?
Right, right.
But for him, the pinkish color that she's emanating around her is a lot more than that. And so the next morning, Miriam is going to rush toward Yeshua and she prosternates in front of him to touch his feet. And Yeshua realized that this impulse does not come from her head, but from her heart.
Mm-hmm.
And he let her do it.
No.
And I know our audience knows that how much he doesn't like to be,
right.
revered
right.
like that. And
right.
he doesn't like people to prosternate in front of him. Yeah. But with Miriam, Yeshua is going to revel in this moment, and he placed his hand on her head, directly on her hair, which have not been combed yet. Mm-hmm. And Miriam must have perceived this thought because she goes, I was about to do it, Rabbi.
Oh, they're like telepathically communicating.
Yes. Yeah. She wanted to, to let him know that, okay, well, I realize your thought, Right. And at that point, she pulls a large wooden comb and both of them are starting to laugh.
That's cute.
Yeah, that's very cute. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So a moment later, the group of disciples rushes into Yussaf's home, and Andros tried to close and lock the heavy door to the garden, between the garden and the street. And he says to Yeshua, may the peace be with you, Master. Mm-hmm. We did not lie this time. They are all at the end of the street. They know now where you live.
Oh, geez. Oh, no.
They followed us. And of course, Andros was talking about the beggars and the sick people.
Right, everybody want to get healed.
Those who were waiting for Yeshua near the bedside, right? And Yeshua says, oh, it is fine, my friends. It is also for them that I am in Jerusalem. We know if one of them, who knows if one of them does not have an appointment with me. And then he turns to his disciple and he says, do not believe that you will be the only ones to follow me and to share my life. There will be many more. So Yeshua is stepping outside in the street and he sees about 30 men and women waiting for him. And some are praying, while others are chatting. And when they see Yeshua, they try to run toward him, at least those who could run. Yeah. And Yeshua turns to the group of beggars and sick people and he goes, who did you come to find here? Always a question.
Right.
And of course, nobody responds. So Yeshua invites them all to move on a wooden stairs, in the shades, so they are protected from the sun. Mm-hmm. And he looks quickly at their soul with no exception. So he's going to actually spend time looking at every one of their souls.
Oh.
Okay, so 30 people that he's
right.
scrutinizing in a way. And what he sees is that all these men and women are blocked by the suffering of their bodies. And at one point, he decided to heal them all.
At the same time? Oh, wow.
Yes. And he realized also that they are all lacking love. Mm. nobody in Jerusalem is ready to give them any love. But he also realized that they are missing the desire to give love. You know, they are such wretch, you know, that they do not feel like they can give love to anybody else. And it's a love that they are all very thirsty for. So, and Yeshua is thinking that the human being does a quantum leap when he realizes that the balance of life is in the exchange, is in the free circulation of the wave of love. To receive, you have to learn how to give. And I think we mentioned that before, right? You cannot love somebody else if you do not love yourself.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So Yeshua sees that every one of these souls is tired, so tired that they had recognized altogether the trace and the fragrance of the sun, of some light that could change something for them. Okay, and that's a light, of course, emanated by Yeshua. So Yeshua steps down on the staircase, realizing that he has never done something like this, but is absolutely confident about the outcome. I mean, we know he has been healing a lot of people, but usually he heals them individually.
Right.
This time he's going to do it for a group of 30 people. Yeah. And there is an enormous flow of compassion inside his chest that is coming, you know, so he has no other choice than to use it. And he just needs to guide that energy. And the way he's going to do it, of course, you know, I mean, he's describing the internal mechanics of what he's doing, but I mean, I'm very happy to know how he does it, but it's not really teaching us anything, you know, at that point, you know. So he takes a long breath and he brings the force, which is in his heart, to his root chakra. And he's going to spin it in his root chakra to energize it and probably to mingle it with his own energy, right? And suddenly he's going to redirect it, you know, along his spine toward his heart chakra. And from the heart chakra, it's going to be jettisoned all over the group of beggars. Yes. Yeah, it's like a, you know, a headlight, you know,
right.
Being turned
Spanning
on.
Out.
Yeah. And finally, he expires a little hair that is left in his chest, you know, and he watches the energy shower the small crowd because he can see the energy, right, which has been jettisoned out of him. And he sees that, you know, following down on the crowd like a rain. And in front of him, everybody cries. From the lowest step of the stair to the highest steps, you know, everybody is crying. Even his disciples behind him, who stay behind, are all crying. And Yeshua watches as the shells, you know, the armors, the shields of every one of those people are cracking open and turning to dust. And he knows that in the next moment, all the disorders, wounds, infirmities will no longer be.
Wow.
Yeah. It's quite amazing. Huh?
Yeah, they probably got a big dose of love too,
yes,
right?
Exactly.
I mean, that's what probably made it very emotional.
Yes, and that is what he's healing them.
Yeah.
Yes. And as always, as he always does, Yeshua walks away as the process of healing takes place in the small crowd. You know, and so Yeshua and his group of disciples are going to walk toward the main temple in Jerusalem, which is always crowded, you know. It's full of noise, and there are flocks of sheep being led into the temple for the slaughtering, right? As you may remember, you clean your karma by slaughtering sheep. That's how it works.
That makes it easy to do bad things.
Yeah, you can do all kinds of bad things. As long as you have a sheep, money to pay for that, you can redeem yourself.
Yeah, just
So at one point, Yeshua perceives a new presence following them, you know? And he walks toward that man who is, and the newcomer seems very startled that he was, you know, recognized. Or, I mean, he thought maybe he was just, you know, incognito, yeah. And Yeshua tells him, you know, you were on the step with the others. What is your name? And the man says, Judas. Yes, I was there and you healed me.
Oh.
But who are you? So Judas asks Yeshua, who are you? And at that point, Yeshua smiles. And he thinks inside himself, it's a difficult question. Who am I? Am I Yeshua? It's not true anymore because he has now the Christic energy in him, right? And we know that the personality of Yeshua has been put on the back burner. Am I the Messiah? It is not up to him to take such title. And Yeshua simply respond to Judas and tell him, you can simply call me Rabbi. But show me your wound. And Yeshua looks at the wound and he said, ooh, it's a knife. A knife did it, right? So what do you want in following me like this? Didn't you get what you needed? He was basically coming to be healed.
Right.
And Yeshua can see that the big wound he had on his leg is now completely healed, And Judas says, I'm expecting more, Rabbi. I would like to study with you, listen to you. I have some ideas, and I studied.
Oh.
And Yeshua turns to him again and says, do you know how to love? And Judas says, I can do it. And Yeshua goes, with a knife that attracts another knife? Is that how you love? And at that point, Judas lowers his eyes and Yeshua touches his shoulder and blesses him. So, I don't know what is being said about Judas in the scriptures, but Judas is actually someone who has been studying. He's not idiot. He's actually quite politically engaged, unfortunately, in a way, but that's the way it was supposed to be. Again, it's a cosmic plan.
It is. It's
but
the divine plan.
He's like Eleazar. He's one of the most capable and the most educated disciple of Yeshua. Yeah. So at that point, Yeshua and his group are leaving the main temple, and Yeshua needs to rest, to meditate and pray a little bit. As you know, even though he has this fantastic Christic energy inside him, he still needs some downtime.
You still need to recharge.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's going to walk back on top of the hill, covered with the olive tree, and this is a place where he really enjoys it a lot. And he's going to pray, and his prayers are very simple. He's asking Awon, God, to guide every one of his moves and to make sure that the flow of every word he's saying is filled with God love, okay?
Right.
And he knows that his whole person is going to be monitored, analyzed. Everything he's going to say is going to be analyzed. And everything he says will be also suspect, in Jerusalem. They would not trust what he says. So he has to be very careful about that. And the following morning, he's still in Uncle Yussaf's home. He meets Myriam again. And she was going to the market to purchase some fruits and vegetables as usual, She does that every day. So she pretended first not to see Yeshua,
the games we play.
Yeah, the games, exactly. And
Wrong person to do that with.
Right. She quickly corrected that by saluting him with her two arms crossed on her chest. That's the
Essene way.
The Essene way, yeah. She was, by this gesture, trying to tell Yeshua that she was also part of the Essene fraternity, right? And community. And in turn, Yeshua salutes her in return in the same way, okay? And they walk together to the market, and Myriam tells Yeshua, Rabbi, I wore the white dress one day. I am not sure I was allowed to do it, but it did not matter.
Rebel.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. It was when I started living in Migdel, in the little village of Migdel, and work with the plants and their oils. And by wearing the white dress, the white robe, this way I had the feeling to better touch the souls of the plants and to officiate in some kind of sanctuary. Of course, it was just my idea, But one morning, an old man who pretended to go to the lake stopped, and seeing me in that robe, he started insulting me under the pretext I did not deserve to be dressed with such white linen.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's
A lot of
old,
judgment, huh?
that old man,
Mm-hmm.
going to that young woman and telling her, oh no, you don't deserve to be wearing such. So she says to Yeshua, that broke something in me. And since then, I do not dare wearing the white robe. And Yeshua thinks about it for a while, and then he goes, forget about that white robe, my sister. I'm not looking for the purity of the robe, but another purity which is much more difficult to wear, the purity of your heart. Tell me again, would you not be hungry for more than fruits and vegetables? Because he knows that she's going to go and shop for fruits and vegetables.
Right.
I have the feeling that you need a stronger nourishment. And at that point, Miriam responds a big yes, that resonates inside Yeshua. So seeing that her heart was opening, Yeshua says, we are very happy at Yussaf's home, right, at Yussaf's place. But you, like him, are aspiring to something else. Do you want to live the true life? I can see that you never have enough. And the following night, Yeshua is going to make a powerful dream that will never be shared. Okay, so that dream is not has not been given in the Akashic Memories. Yes, we don't know anything. But what we know is that Myriam was in that dream. And when we woke up, there was absolutely no doubt for Yeshua about the role she was going to play in his life. Yes.
She's the one.
She's the one, exactly. Yeah. And a large part of Yeshua's life and his words were going to go through her, actually. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and he could feel that the pact had to be resurrected, and the soul of Myriam had given her blessing for this pact to be brought back to life.
Right.
So the following days, Yeshua and Myriam talks a lot. Their exchange again will remain secret and personal. It's probably an exchange of love, and we don't have to be in the middle of it. Yeah, and actually, it was to the point that time will never release it. Okay, so this is a warning for the Akashic travelers. You will never get it.
You'll never get it.
And one evening in the garden of Yussaf, Yeshua asks Myriam, do you recognize my past as being perhaps your past as well? And then at that point, he kissed each one of the Miriam's eyelids while she took his hand. And they kept talking late into the night. So sweet, yes. Very, very sweet.
What's so nice is that we don't get that kind of exchange between Yeshua and Myriam in the Bible.
Oh no!
Like all these personal kind of conversations. I mean, we don't have that. I mean, I haven't read the whole Bible, but it's like I didn't see.
Oh no! Like, of course, this is not
that intimacy that he has with his disciples.
That burgeoning love,
Yeah, and then of course with Myriam. Yeah, it's really nice.
So I think for the audience again, who may have been heavily stained by the Bible, I think it's important to tell more about the life of Myriam. Okay, and so Myriam was married with a man called Saul from Tars, Saul of Tars. Saul is known as Paul in the Western world. And Paul is the one who has written about the good 2/3 of the Bible.
The Pauline Bible.
The Pauline Bible that everybody is following, okay?
Yeah.
And so Paul was a violent man. He was an alcoholic. And he was beating Myriam. She had a son with him called Marcus. And at one point, one day, she decided to basically leave him because she couldn't stand it anymore. She couldn't stand that man who preferred, to deal with the Romans or boasting about himself.
How did she end up with him to begin? Oh, was it
Well,
an arranged marriage?
it could have been an arranged marriage,
Mhm.
but Saul was actually very impressive. I mean, um, intellectually, he's very capable. He speaks multiple languages. He also is a Roman citizen.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Although he was born in Palestine,
Mhm.
he's a Roman citizen, so he has a dual citizenship, we could say, right? And so at one point, she said, "I cannot stand this man anymore." So she left him,
Mhm.
and she knew by doing that she would be
Ostracized. Yeah.
and pulled into the mud. And
Yeah.
that's why, I mean, Saul or Paul has never ever accepted that
She left him.
she left him.
Mhm.
And this is why in the Bible
Oh,
he has
geez.
been painting her as a prostitute, a whore, or the worst woman possible. And the worst that could happen is actually that same woman, Miriam,
Mhm.
became the wife of Yeshua. And Paul has never met Yeshua and has always aspired to be his main disciple.
Oh.
He had this grandiose plan in him,
Right.
to be, I want to be the first disciple of Yeshua.
Mhm.
But of course, he had never met him in the physical,
Okay.
despite all the stuff that
Right.
he may say.
It appears like he has.
It
with
appears,
everything, right?
it appears, but according to the memory of
Mhm.
nature, he was never in presence of the flesh of Yeshua.
Hmm.
There will be one meeting, we will talk about it much later, where Yeshua talks to Paul in his light body.
Oh.
Okay? And I think that was so impressive to Paul that maybe Paul thought at one point that he had actually met Yeshua.
Oh.
But it was only the light body,
Oh.
the image,
Okay. Right.
of Yeshua.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, but I think for the audience, it's very important to understand, why this magnificent woman that is Miriam has been desecrated by those misogynistic, priests and bishops and popes,
and rabbis probably
and rabbis
too.
and
I'm sure
all
they
the
all
people,
ran her through the mud.
who have used the hate,
Yeah.
the hatred that
Yeah.
Paul had for his wife,
Mhm.
and turned the entire feminine energy, into something despicable.
Right.
I think it's so important to understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree.
I mean, Yeshua has been surrounding himself with a lot of, incredible women, and Miriam is one of them. His mother, Myriam, is another one, which is incredible too. But there will be others, and we will talk about Shlomit, Salome, and Jacobi also, which are also known as Mary Jacobi and Mary Salome, which are the three, with Miriam, the three main disciples.
The three Marys.
The three Marys that will rotate around Yeshua. Okay, so as we have an incredible opportunity to read an excerpt of the book of the Three Marys, also written by Daniel Mauroy. And we saw in this presentation the perspective from Yeshua's point of view, but now we're going to hear it from Miriam.
Yeah.
So
that's great.
Okay, so I'm offering you to read the book, and I invite you all actually to get that book.
Right, because that one's in English.
Yeah, it's all in English, and it's probably the second or third book which has been translated, so it's quite rare. And it is so full of an incredible teaching and wisdom that I invite you all to purchase it.
Yeah,
you can get it on Amazon or some other places.
Yeah.
All right, so we hope you enjoyed that long presentation. Yes. And now let's listen to Myriam.
Yay. Well, thank you so much.
When I first met Yeshua, like you, I knew nothing of him other than he was a distant cousin of mine. My adoptive father, Yussaf, had sometimes spoken to me in an enigmatic way, telling me only that he was very learned and that to advance in wisdom, He had gone away, still very young, to make a long journey toward the east. I had almost forgotten about him, so much had happened. There was my unhappy marriage to Saul, then this son, Marcus, whom I had with him, and finally a flight from Saul's house, which had become unlivable for me. You know my rather rebellious nature. How could have I spent my life in the home of a man with violent tendencies who loved wine more than reason and was fascinated by power? When I left Saul's house in Jerusalem, I knew what I was facing. His pride was offended. He did not hesitate to accuse me of being an adulterous woman, even a prostitute. In despair, but also out of fear, I left my son with him, still a child, so as not to unleash his anger too much. I first took refuge with my father, highly respected as you know, then later in the little house he owned in Migdel. It took a few years for him to persuade Saul to entrust me with our son Marcus. In truth, I think his son waited on him more than anything else. His passion was primarily his business, as he called it, with the Romans. This painful episode in my life put me into a state of revolt against men for a long time. Saul and his excess had become for me the symbol of the masculine gender in its entirety. Of course, I was aware of my own excess in this attitude, but there was an anger in me that I could not allay. It was the work of plants and herbs that little by little helped my soul find its center. Fortunately, the Migdol house had a small garden surrounded by a dried stone wall. An old woman, a relative of Yussaf, had recently lived in the home. She was from the fraternity, the Essenian community. She had lived for a long time in one of the villages. It was there that she learned the old secrets of plants and ointments. When she went to heaven, I inherited her knowledge and skills. On the fringes of everything pointed out by sun, I rebuilt myself from there. I confess to you, my friends, that I hardly prayed any more. The harshness of this world and the trap into which I had fallen made me similar to those thorny bits that you find almost everywhere in our countryside. At best, I was a thistle because of its mauve flower, which resembled a small fragment of soul remaining hidden in spite of everything, somewhere in me. Everything changed one day when I visited Yussaf in his beautiful home in Jerusalem. As I crossed the threshold of his interior garden, I immediately saw the silhouette of a tall man. He was talking to Yussaf. I wanted to slip away so as not to disturb them, but my father, Yussaf, immediately made a sign to me to come forward. The man turned around. It was Yeshua. You guessed it. I'm telling you, I was shocked. Not that I found him particularly handsome, but because of the intensity of his gaze. The one he had in that moment was both soft and transparent. I couldn't stand it. I lowered my head. Then I bowed to greet him, hoping to leave immediately. My father dissuaded me from leaving straight away, and the man himself insisted that I stay. His uncle Yussaf, he assured me, had just told him about me. I could definitely not turn on my heels. My father then put his right hand on my heart and very officially introduced me to Yeshua, this very special relative he had already told me about, who had now become a rabbi. What to say to you next that Yeshua fascinated me and that I saw him many times during my stay in Jerusalem? Yes, of course, but not even the word fascinated fits. In fascination, there is often some seduction. However, I was not seduced, I was seized, almost grabbed in the depth of my being. Not only was I convinced that I had known Yeshua forever, but I was immediately convinced that he was the change I needed in my life. I, it had nothing to do with a feeling of love. This certainly came from a sort of sacred breath or awakening. In fact, it was inevitable that I would meet Yeshua because we were both staying at Yussaf's home in Migdel. I remember that he spoke to me very little at first. It was rather me who was seized with a sudden need to express myself, as if fearing a silence between us. So I asked him 1,000 questions about his travels. He answered them quite briefly and with a sweetness in his voice that has never ceased to impress me. During our second meeting, I felt the irresistible need to touch his feet, not because he was a rabbi, but because I had already understood that he was not like all of us, that he was radiating something unknown and incredibly pure. He let me do it, and my gesture lasted a very long time, I think. It was for him and me a form of a pact or of a recognition. I do not know. I have often lived these moments behind my closed eyelids, and I tell myself that they are among the most beautiful of my life. Not a word escaped our breasts. It was not necessary. A single sound would have impoverished everything. When I got up, he only said to me, Miriam, there are portions of a path that more than others invite us to walk. Do you recognize the one that I'm starting as perhaps also yours? Without understanding fully the meaning of his question, I nodded a big yes. We parted until the evening meal. He did not want me to eat at a separate table as officially prescribed. It was his way of reminding us of his heartfelt belonging to our community, the Essene community. I was deeply annoyed because I could not constantly escape his gaze or conceal my confusion. The days that follow also never ceased to surprise me. The somewhat lonely rabbi that I first imagined he was turned out to be, surrounded by a great number of people full of reverence for him. They waited for him at the end of the day at the corner of the alley where Yussaf had his house. One morning, when I crossed the threshold at the same time as he did to go to the market, Yeshua suddenly asked me if I wanted to join them. Rabbi, I need to fill this calabash with some vegetables from the garden. Miriam, tell me, he answered me with that serious and sometimes little mocking air that we have all perceived from him. Miriam, are you only hungry for vegetables? Looks to me like you're asking for a little bigger meal, don't you think so? I pretended I pretended I didn't understand and looked quickly at the group of people waiting for him. By all appearances, they were common people, although a few wore rather beautiful dresses. We live well with Yussaf, he continued, but is this the life you want to live? Yussaf himself aspired to something else. You are one of those in a quest for a meal that you never get enough of. Recognize it. These few words, which I at the time found a little judgmental, marked the real beginning of everything. Without protesting and without reasoning, I followed Yeshua to the end of the alley and joined those who were waiting for him there. Walking briskly, we passed through the open gate to leave the city. We eventually sat down facing the arid mountains. This is where I first heard Yeshua teach. I have to tell you, my sisters, that I didn't take anything from what he said. His words did not enter me through my ears to settle in my memory, but they have inhabited my flesh from the first moment. This is how I absorbed them, with something about me that I had never known existed. It was a total revelation. Who was this man who spoke to the Lord like his father, and who gave words a color other than how we know them? He was not a rabbi. A few hours later, I returned to Yussaf's house in tears, with the calabash empty. I was overwhelmed by what had entered me. I had been burned by enthusiasm, and it felt like my body and soul were on fire. My father didn't question me. He has always been discreet and marked by wisdom. I think that day he was already seeing things happen. This stay in Jerusalem lasted several weeks, but I do not know what mystery each day brought us closer, Yeshua and me. No matter how much I forced myself not to follow him, everywhere in order to collect the lightning words of peace that he sowed in his path, everything was always put in place to make us meet, even outside the place where we were staying. Even though I repeated to myself that I had to go back to Migdel to find my son Marcus, who was learning the profession of fishing with a few young people his age, I could not decide whether to go. As I have mentioned to you, I experienced Yeshua's peaceful teachings like a life changed, mixed with rebellion and kindness, cutting out what didn't serve me anymore, where the human in me meets the divine. One evening, in my father's little garden, when we had coincidentally found each other alone, Yeshua asked me the same question, the one that marked our second meeting. Do you recognize, Miriam, the path that I started as perhaps also yours? I remember looking down. I also blushed and tensed up. What did I need to answer? I didn't need to say a word. Yeshua leaned over me and placed a light kiss on each of my eyelids. He then took my hand, and we were able to talk about the path that was opening up, the path to take, and what it would eventually mean for him, for me, for us. I admit that I have no measure of the challenge that this represented. I saw only the tenderness that he offered me to be a supreme blessing. I did not suspect that under the veil of his grace was hidden the greatest challenge a human can experience, facing the seduction of separation when connecting with the infinite light. You have experienced it in your own way, Jacobi, Salome, my friends and my sisters. When we approach too much a bearer of light, we instantly ignite the fire of adversity. We immediately call the most difficult initiations those that enrich the soul forever, but that also stab the body to force it to be reborn in truth. So I said yes to Yeshua about taking his path. I was still just a proud and rebellious woman, oblivious to the whip of life that was going to crack behind my every step. Thus, a few months later, our wedding took place in Cana.